Hi, I'm Julia Ain-Krupa, and this is the Impatient Moviegoer. I asked myself, how does one begin to speak or even think about a film as powerful as The Brutalist? How can one draw conclusions while also exploring the details? So much has already been said about this epic film, from the sweeping screenplay by auteur Brady Corbet and his partner, actress and director Mona Fastvold, to the extraordinarily moving and alive performances by Adrian Brody as Hungarian immigrant Laszlo Toth, Felicity Jones as his wife Erzsébet, and Guy Pearce as his sleazy benefactor Van Buren. And what about the film's incredible brutalist architecture, an entire world within a world, designed by production designer Judy Baker, a living portfolio built in surface of the creation of a mythical genius? And what of Lowell Crawley's beyond breathtaking cinematography, grabbing us from the very first shot with a kind of long-forgotten immediacy? What about the choice to shoot using large format VistaVision film, to bring the production to Hungary, where the gentle landscape, dense colors, and textures of Eastern Europe interplay so eloquently with the grain of real celluloid film, evoking a past and nearly forgotten America, reconstructing a strangely perfect, forgotten world? And what of the pounding and brilliant score created by young British composer Daniel Blumberg, which employs the use of brass instruments to conjure a greater-than-life poeticism, recalling national anthems written in a bygone era, giving cinema new life? And here I've only touched upon the edges of this mammoth endeavor, a true work of art consisting of layers of obsession, passion, and devotion, realized by all the contributing members of this extraordinary team of committed artists, with Corbet at the helm, making The Brutalist what it is, extraordinary. This is a love letter to The Brutalist, a pause for appreciation. From the get-go, we arrive at a window onto the past. Laszlo's young niece, Zsófia, is sitting at a table before a window leading out onto a bleak world. She is being yelled at, and she is distraught, at the mercy of those in power, sheltered by the gray shadow landscape behind her. She can barely catch her breath. And then, as a horn pronounces the start of this journey, we are brought into the belly of a ship. We hear the narration of Laszlo's wife, Erzsébet, her letter being read over this opening sequence, dramatic declaration somehow emphasizing the percussive imagery of crowded trains and the concentration camps of our imagination, until we are disoriented, led to wonder where we are in this chaotic darkness. Pumping our hearts to the beat of Blumberg's soundtrack, Laszlo Toth climbs from a darkened underworld to the open shores of America paved with gold. Or are they? One of the main questions addressed in The Brutalist is the destructive nature of capitalism, with all its pain and its glory. And yes, like the works of writer W.G. Sebald, who Corbet cites as one of his primary muses, as he's quick to point out that much of his inspiration comes from music, writing, and visual art, rather than from film, though he does mention Douglas Sirk as a sort of godfather for the project, cinephile that he is. There is a meandering, a spiraling that reaches back, turning the story inside out and outside in, until you, the reader, are pleasantly lost. As Corbet said in an interview in Filmmaker magazine, writers like Sebald found a way to this concussed feeling of the trauma and burden of history, and the fact that this is something that we carry with us all the time, unquote. There are many moments in the film where we are caught in the thumping depths of darkness, whether it be the painful web of human interactions experienced by a new immigrant who is also a Jew, at a time where Jews were considered truly to be second-class citizens throughout much of the world. Back to the intro. Silhouetted travelers shout as they walk about with their suitcases to the tune of Erzsébet's narration, a precursor to their long period of waiting to be reunited. From the depths of darkness, Laszlo emerges into the wind and light, the illuminated torch of the Statue of Liberty's outstretched arms seemingly reaching toward him as he laughs with giddy delight. He will happily surrender his nightmares, give her his exhaustion, his hunger, his newfound poverty as he adopts the American dream. But what of that dream? This film so pointedly asks. With the Statue of Liberty's torch first seen from a reversed perspective, a visual cue that indicates where the story is in fact headed, depicting what professor, film historian, and author Annette Insdorf so accurately describes as, quote, the underside of the American dream. This opening sequence is a masterful work of genius, the marriage of elements of cinematography, writing, and score colliding in one straight arrow that shoots to the heart of any viewer. Now we are in the hands of someone who knows what they want to say. This is an auteur, a director with confidence. In an interview in Session magazine, Corbet says, "For me, it is impossible to make a film about the American myth that doesn't also simultaneously dismantle it," unquote. And dismantle it he does. One of the reasons this film is so moving to me is that, as the child of an immigrant, I have seen firsthand this particular brand of vulnerability. The words spoken, the accent mocked, pointed out, the feeling of always being reminded that you are an outsider, especially if you hail from a country or a background that is considered to be lesser than. Being ultra-sensitive to this only makes me appreciate the Brutalist more, for it understands a foreigner's vision of infinite possibility, that great innocence as well as a frequent and grave disappointment. All these subtle elements are wholly embodied in Adrien Brody's performance. He has channeled his own Hungarian grandfather to beautifully express the buried hurt. And in the subtle movements across the planes of his face, a playful humor thrives. We get a glimpse of this when Laszlo shaves in the mirror, enjoyably repeating the tongue twister. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. How many peppers did Peter Piper pick? I can barely do it. Familiar is the ever-present sense that one's lived experience must be suppressed in order to create an atmosphere of comfort for those around you. An equal playing field with people who have never known oppression or the terrific sensation of being a foreigner, establishing a kind of buffer zone to translate the truth for those who have always lived with the privilege of belonging. It is the same tension that gives rise to the raw, monumental buildings that are the visual centerpiece of the film, art being a place where the truth is still allowed. These structures are monuments to freedom, even if the personal cost of making them in service of a wealthy sponsor turns out to be rather high. Laszlo pours his heart into these works. Like massive memorials paying tribute to a battle or a hero, they are tombstones marking the vanished world, and yet they will live on. Laszlo almost cries when he discovers that his pre-war buildings are still standing. The buildings live on even if his loved ones do not. This tells us that art is something worth striving for as it continues to exist after we are gone. Buildings can last, something remains. This finding is enough to inspire Laszlo to keep going, processing his deep emotions through the act of creation. We see this drive demonstrated when he throws himself into drawing, woodworking, and soldering his first American pieces, a table and chair. These images of his creative fervor are overlaid with the dramatic news of the establishment of the State of Israel. Laszlo, I am alive. This is the first line of Erzsébet's letter read as Laszlo lies on the ground of the steamship. If there is any doubt as to the level of intensity of this film, we are being told that this is a matter of life or death. Art is the method of survival. There's a kind of carefree eagerness and abandon with which Laszlo runs for his first bus in America, headed to stay with his cousin in Philadelphia, a city at the heart of industry at that time. I will see you, he says earnestly, as he bids farewell to his shipmate and friend. He flips a coin for good luck. I find this moment to be very tender and moving, because within the sense of wild hope and endless possibility lies an innocence and an inherent disappointment, a new kind of heartbreak, one for which the old world could never have prepared him. The film has barely begun, but already I'm beginning to cry. Every film I've made is about a post-traumatic generation, Corbet said in a podcast interview with Mark Maron. Though some of the press about the Brutalist, I feel, has made an effort to take distance from the importance of Laszlo Toth's Jewish identity, the fact that he is a man who has just been in a concentration camp, who nearly lost his life and most of his family and friends, is marked by his name and his looks, his nose, and is often treated as a second-class citizen because not only is he a foreigner, but he's also a Jew, plays a big role in who he is and what he creates. When Laszlo first arrives at his relative's home, he discovers that his cousin has changed his name to Miller and that he is not only with a shiksa, as Laszlo playfully calls his cousin's non-Jewish wife, but that they are both now Catholic. He is converted, erasing his past. It is just a moment, but included to make a point. In the new world, you will have to fight to retain your identity, to remain true to who you are. But the film makes clear that it is not only Jews, clearly, who suffer under this hierarchy. Standing in line for handouts at a local church, Laszlo befriends Gordon, a black man, and his child. Laszlo assures him that he will come early himself the next day to ensure that the boy will eat. Here we see the easygoing endurance and generosity of a man who probably hasn't eaten much himself for several years, of a man who has lived through war. Laszlo and Gordon will become fast friends and colleagues. They're connected. It doesn't take long for us to understand that in this new world, money trumps all. When Laszlo goes to his local rabbi to speak about Erzsébet and Zsófia, the rabbi says it will be difficult to bring them to America, but they will try. Ultimately, it will be Van Buren, Laszlo's wealthy patron, and his prominent lawyer, Michael, who will help bring his family over. Through his connection with Van Buren, Laszlo encounters wealthy, established Jews. They are generous and helpful, wearing their money like a protective cloak to keep them from being exposed as second-class citizens like Laszlo. Their money and success enables them to cross social boundaries, a hallmark of a capitalist society. As American Jews, they are able to distance themselves from what their people have been going through across the world. What was it like, the war? Michael's convert wife casually asked Laszlo at a party. She's perched at the table in a golden gown. She could just as easily be inquiring about his recent trip abroad. This moment once again highlights the foreigner's plight, any foreigner. How does one begin to explain the horrors of war to one who has never experienced such hardship? There is a widening divide. In another moment, Erzsébet and Zsófia have just arrived, and as if to humiliate Laszlo in front of them, Van Buren throws a penny across the table. In a painfully uncomfortable exchange, he quietly insists that Laszlo pass the coin back. Not only is this a play on anti-Semitic tropes that forever connect Jews to money, but a subtle exchange to prove who is on top and to put Laszlo in his place. Laszlo, we tolerate you, Van Buren's son Harry will later say. Therein lies the rub. I'm not what I expected, Laszlo says to his cousin Attila's wife when she gives him a hard time for sleeping in their storage closet for too long. I'm not what I expected are the words of someone who has, in departing his homeland, severed ties with the self he once knew. In her book, Strangers to Ourselves, Julia Kristeva speaks of the foreigner. Since he is nothing, he can sacrifice everything, she says. In this way, Laszlo Toth fits the typecast of a man possessed by his American dream. Into his work, Laszlo channels his suffering and his immense rage, seeking oblivion. When he isn't working, he shoots heroin in order to erase his pain, to to ease his pain. From an injury, he claims, that injury is not only his broken nose, but his life experience. His answer to coping with his trauma is to numb out and to create, to become like a god who has power over something. Corbet says that he likes it when one's feelings as a spectator remain unresolved in perpetuity. Such is the experience of an artist who is forever searching for that moment of consummation. The pursuit of transcendence is a constant roller coaster ride of uncertainty and exaltation. The Brutalist offers a window onto this way of being of the life of an artist. In one of many interviews, Corbet links the plight of the artist to that of the immigrant. He says that, quote, an artist is fighting for the right for their projects to exist. The immigrant is fighting for the right for their family to coexist, unquote. Both will do anything to preserve what is sacred. Cinema for me is like a cathedral, he says. And speaking of the sublime, one of the most extraordinary sequences in the film occurs when Laszlo and Van Buren travel to a marble quarry in Carrara, Italy, a source once used by Michelangelo himself. Laszlo has worked with this stonemason before, and they reconnect for the first time in years since the war. The mason emerges as a Christ-like figure with his long white hair and simple woolen suit. He is a man devoted to his craft, living a simple, albeit extraordinary life that is counter completely to the type that is respected in a capitalist society. He exists in perpetual humility and awe of his material, the marble that he carves. Together, the threesome climbs to the top, a chalky world encased in mist. We follow the mason towards the marble, the wind howling, his words echoing, emphasizing the spaciousness. The dialogue is no longer in sync with the scene. We have entered a living dream. Here the sound has a hollow, sparse quality, and the style of editing shifts, employing jump cuts to emphasize the hypnotic haze. We all fall under its spell. Aloft in the clouds, we are on a giant formation from the origins of time, grand and awe-inspiring. This scene calls to mind elements of cinematic masterpieces such as Shadows of Forgotten Ancestors and Tarkovsky's The Mirror. It is almost mystical. In brutal contrast, this vision will ultimately bring darker experiences into Laszlo's life. As with other great films about America, with the exception of a few exterior shots, The Brutalist was actually made outside the US. This decision to export production only emphasizes the challenges of working in an established American system, both financially and creatively. It was in Hungary that Corbet and his crew were able to make such a masterful work of art for a budget that Hollywood considers small. This choice underlines the fact that America has become financially inaccessible for many people who live here. As historian Timothy Snyder wrote in his recently published book on freedom, the fulfillment of the American dream is something that becomes less and less possible by the year. I dare say that it is almost as if America is becoming a myth unto itself, as it has always been for the likes of Kafka and for many filmmakers, such as for Lars von Trier with Dogville or Coralie Fagia with her critically acclaimed The Substance, and many others. And so America becomes like a state of mind. I also was thinking about how the system in Hollywood was actually shaped by many Eastern European immigrants who created this idea of America for America, many of whom also changed their names. America is a figment of the imagination, both a heaven and a hell, and it belongs to all of us, both to the people who know it intimately and to those who have never visited its shores. The Brutalist depicts America as a place that brutally mistreats the other. It suggests that with all its supposed greatness, it is a failed experiment. When speaking to Van Buren about the survival of his works, Laszlo burns with emotion. He says, quote, when the terrible recollections of what happened in Europe cease to humiliate us. I expect for them to serve instead as a political stimulus, sparking the upheavals that so frequently occur in the cycles of peoplehood, unquote. Watching this film at a time where the tide of history is turning so powerfully, I can't help but feel that it is not by accident that a film like The Brutalist arrives on the scene. As Laszlo so eloquently puts it, we are in a cycle of peoplehood now, blind to our future and to how we got here and to where our destiny will lead. In times of crisis, it is important to be reminded of the purpose of art, and that not only can art transcend the mundane, but that it also has the power to humanize, to teach us something about who we are, and most critically about who we can become. And with that, I'm Julia Ain-Krupa. This is the Impatient Moviegoer. Watch The Brutalist. Keep watching movies. Keep searching for the beauty in life. And I'll see you next time. Take care. Thanks.